A 9/11 memorial vandalized in Plymouth less than a week after town's other landmarks were defaced. Photos showed a statue of a police officer at the memorial was knocked over. Not the worst vandalism in the world, but still vandalism. And I don't understand why someone would vandalize a 9/11 memorial. That just, I don't get. There was vandalism on Plymouth Rock. That I do get. And I think it's stupid. But you get all these people who are far left, colonialism, down with white supremacy, all this other stupid nonsense. And they think they're glorious freedom fighters. The far left has actively defended rioting, vandalism, and destruction. But I actually think there's an interesting conversation that needs to be had, a thought-provoking one. Because there's a guy from Black Lives Matter who I actually respect. He made some interesting points. I'll get to that. But first, the news. What's going on with these a landmark and a memorial being vandalized, and why? ABC News says, another landmark in the town of Plymouth, Massachusetts, was vandalized, making it the 8th site in less than a week to be tampered with, officials said. The 8th site. So this is a problem. Wave of vandalism. This time it was the 9/11 memorial, which was found desecrated by vandals on Sunday, according to the town's fire department. Now you're really getting me angry. Now you're really getting me pissed off. You can criticize culture, you can criticize history, but 9/11 was something else. That was people knowing they were going to lose their lives to make sure other people could keep theirs. These were firefighters, police officers, medics, many of whom suffered in the decades following with cancer in their lungs and other ailments. Desecrate that, you are scum. The memorial, a 6 feet tall granite pillar with the names of those killed in the attacks engraved on it, and statues of a firefighter and a police officer standing beside it, was erected in 2004. Photos showed the police officer statue at the memorial was knocked over with his head separate from his body. The statue of the firefighter at the memorial did not appear to be touched, so we know why they did it. A statement against police, but the wrong statement. You people are disgusting scumbags. I've had police kick in my door in Chicago, violating my constitutional rights. I have been falsely arrested before. I have dealt with real malfeasance from bad cops. And you know what? I'm more than willing to criticize the culture and say, yes, we should talk about the bad cops, but not this one. Not a 9/11 memorial. That is the opposite of what we want to criticize. That is what we want to cherish. They can knock us down, but we will always get back up even stronger, the fire department tweeted, noting that more than 25 firefighters came out to help restore the memorial. Bravo, good sirs. The town manager, Melissa Arrighi, wrote on Twitter that all signs of vandalism had been erased by Monday. Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. You can criticize the institution of the police department. You can criticize the history, but 9/11 was something else. These are people who, for all their faults, whatever you want to criticize, put their lives on the line. And many of them made the ultimate sacrifice so that you can live in your fancy protected bubble. Some of the wealthiest people in the world. You want to get mad that there are cops who give out bogus tickets or who plant drugs and do all that other bad stuff? I am right there getting mad with you, criticizing all of that. I did a whole hour-long documentary on Ferguson and the history and the systemic racism and all that stuff. But you lose that argument with everyone when you do something like this. Less than a week before it was vandalized, 7 other iconic sites in Plymouth, including Plymouth Rock, were defaced. The Rock, Pilgrim Maiden statue, and the National Monument to the Forefathers were all tagged with red paint, officials said. That vandalism has also been removed. Good, I'm glad to hear it. Plymouth police told ABC News at the time they were looking into the incident, but had not yet made any arrests. ABC News has reached out to the Plymouth police for more details and whether or not the police believe the instances are connected. Man, there's very few things in the world that would make me want to be a violent person, because I am not a violent person. I don't believe it solves a whole lot, and I think we want to avoid it. I think we want to push ourselves past the need to strike someone. But you will find very little sympathy from me when you do something like this. I will say it for the third time before we move on. I get it. I get the anger over a lot of things bad cops have done. But a 9/11 memorial, dude? Are you kidding me? Come on, man. This brings me to an interesting conversation. This is a story from a couple weeks ago, just about 2 weeks ago. Rioting and vandalism is the American way. Black Lives Matter president blasts peaceful protest as a tool of white supremacy after anti-police demos in New York. Hank Newsom, president of the Black Lives Matter movement in the greater New York area, refused to condemn rioting as a form of protest. Now, here's why I think there's an interesting conversation to be had. And I have a lot of respect for Hank because it's my understanding, I could be wrong, maybe it's not Hank, but I believe Hank was the guy who showed up to a Trump rally and stood alongside Trump supporters as they clapped and cheered for a better America, where he said, we are just asking for the rights granted in the Constitution. He believes in America, and people cheered for it. And I said, that's the kind of message of coming together that we need. So I do have respect for him. He's also done interviews. He speaks candidly, and he speaks about how he feels, and he's willing to speak with other people. So I do respect him. And I think this actually is an interesting good faith argument. It's a really, really interesting argument. I do not agree with rioting and vandalism. Mostly because you get these young people who have no idea what they're talking about. And when we normalize this behavior, then what? Everyone does it? But Hank brings up something interesting that needs to be discussed. The history of this country and acts of vandalism that were cherished in our history. They write, the president of Black Lives Matter in the greater New York area has claimed that rioting is justified at protests because the American way is through bullets and blood, not peaceful protests. Hank Newsom appeared on Fox Nation's No Interruption on Wednesday, speaking to host Tommy Loren about Black Lives Matter and about recent anti-police protests in New York. Newsom, who also appears in the cast of Cop Watch America on BET, told Loren he would not condemn the destruction caused as it calls attention to the organization's grievances with society. To an extent. But listen, there's a big... So first, let's draw a distinction. Smashing a window, annoying. I think it's counterintuitive. It's bad. Desecrating historical monuments and memorials to the people who lost their lives trying to save others, there is a whole other, that is something entirely different. You look, when you smash a Starbucks window, you lose me because I feel like you're hurting the poor people you're supposed to be fighting for. The guy who works at Starbucks, I get it, the corporation you're going after, but they're not going to care about a broken window. So you're really just hurting the working class. But there's a big difference though. But let's see what he says. The civil rights leader also claimed that peaceful protest is the tool of white supremacy, posting the interview to Instagram and slamming Lauren as white supremacist Barbie. Hank, with all due respect, and I mean it, 22,000 people showed up in Richmond, Virginia to protest for gun rights. Some of those people included Black Panthers. Black Panthers were down there too. Guess what? They won. The bill that was going to come in and ban weapons, assault weapons, assault style weapons, they say, was shot down in the Senate as Democrats said no way. That was peaceful protest winning. That was including Black Panthers protesting. Peaceful protest can work. You just need the people to stand up and say enough. And we've seen it around the world. It's not always perfect. It's not always pretty, but you can do it. And when you resort to violence and vandalism and destruction and rioting, you are setting all of us back. I understand the challenges. You want to push hard. You want to push fast. You don't want to wait. But these 22,000 people showed up. They were peaceful, they were calm and they were collected, and they won. And I'm glad they did. Not because I necessarily agree with what their message is. I kind of do. I can respect them in many regards. But it's because they show that you can succeed with peaceful protest. You want to call it white supremacy, but the Black Panthers were there too. And they won as well the right to carry weapons to protect themselves. But here's a good point. The riot is the language of the unheard, Newsom said, comparing the modern day protests to the Boston Tea Party. What if you throw a whole bunch of tea in the water and start a war, he asks. That's what this country was built on. Loren was particularly keen to push Newsom on the recent anti-cop protests in New York, which saw subway stations and other transportation hubs around the city flooded with thousands of protesters. The January 31 protest was organized by a collection of 30 grassroots groups called Decolonize This Place and saw protesters carry signs with slogans such as F the police and no cops, no fares. I'll tell you what my problem was at. I'll tell you what my problem is with that. The subways are public. It's people got to pay fares to make it work because someone's got to do the work and you can't force them to do it. You can't just make it free. People got to pay. So you don't like the system? Well, you got to vote for people. That's how the system works so we can all get along without having violence. When you spray paint, desecrate, and glue these things, all you've done is make sure you're hurting more working class people because it's publicly owned. So that's not good. But he brings up a really good point about the Boston Tea Party. And I was thinking about this like, well, it is a part of American history and I do like America. But I wondered, and I'm asking these questions, I want a legitimate answer. What do you think about the Boston Tea Party? Was it vandalism? I pulled up the Wikipedia page to read about it, and we can see they wore masks. They disguised themselves because what they were doing was going to be illegal. It wasn't a protest. They were destroying property. Lot of teeth thrown into that water was destroyed. And we're taught, I was taught as a young kid, it was a great moment for the Sons of Liberty and pushing forward the idea of independence. But maybe it wasn't necessarily a good thing. Maybe we're just taught to respect the Boston Tea Party because it's part of our history and it was part of the winning outcome. What do you think? So I mean this with all sincerity. I think Hank brings up a really, really good point that there have been times in our history where we've celebrated certain things we denounce today. Is it because we're defending the system we appreciate? We won our independence. We built a country we very much enjoy, and now we want to defend it. I mean, that makes sense. I think there's a certain line where you can say something it's not about hypocrisy. It's about the specifics of what you're trying to build. If people are communists and they go around smashing things, is it more about rejecting communist revolution than it is rejecting vandalism? Or do we just criticize the vandalism? Here's what I think. I think, well, for one, I don't know enough about the Boston Tea Party, and we need to read a lot more history. But I think there is a good point to be made in criticizing destruction of the tea over taxes and things like that. And there's also a good point to be made in the other direction, that sometimes vandalism is a language of the unheard, and they do result in the spreading of a message. I'm not smart enough to pretend like I can tell you what should or shouldn't be, but I can criticize modern acts of vandalism that target poor working class people, and especially target memorials to those who gave their lives so that we could live in comfort. As for the Boston Tea Party, I'd like to hear an answer because I don't think I'm smart enough to actually give you a proper response. It's hard to avoid being hypocritical, and this is one of those questions I like to sit down and actually talk to someone about. So let me know what you think. That's basically the point. I got to keep this one short, so I'll wrap it up here. But I really do mean it when I say that I think Hank Newsom is a good dude. While we may disagree on a lot of issues, I think this is actually a cool subject to discuss where we draw the line and why we draw the line where we do. For me, I can say, interesting question, unequivocally, if I ever see you knocking over a memorial to 9/11, things might get ugly. And you know what, man? I take that back a little bit. I will probably always refrain from being violent, but I will do everything in my power to make sure the cops come and bust you for that. I'll leave it civil, to say the least. But you know, with someone with tremendous respect for the people who would run into a building as debris was falling from the sky and smashing cars, people were screaming, a fireball erupted. You have no idea what this world can really be like. And those people, against every instinct in their body, screaming, run, ran the opposite direction to pull people out. And the people afterwards, when they came back to that rubble, breathing in that toxic air, gave the next 2 decades of their lives. You are disgusting. I'll see you all in the next segment.